Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to another stream of ZBrush 3D printing ideas to reality with me, Aiman Akhtar. Let's test this out. Make sure you guys are getting audio. Okay, that's working. On Twitch, let's try Facebook. Ideas to reality with me, Aiman Akhtar. Let's test this out. Make sure you guys are getting audio. Hi from Mike Berg. Oh, hi, Mark. Okay, good. That's working. Cool. Okay, good. Welcome, guys. All right, so if it's your first time watching me stream, I've been streaming for ZBrush now. This is my third session. And what I am streaming about is 3D printing in ZBrush, ideas to reality. So basically, I talk about one of my many 3D printing projects, and I kind of follow along with you guys so you can see my workflow, my process, and how I take ideas from my head into a physical prototype, possibly into mass manufacture. So far I've been talking about Fungus Ores, which is my dinosaur mushroom hybrid. It's like IP that I'm building. And so you can learn more about that on fungusores.com. I've got 8 different creatures that I've designed, and I'm building, along with my wife, an augmented reality app and mystery box toys. So these are something that we pulled off a Kickstarter for last year in November, and it was successful. And so now we're actually going into mass production on these. My first time making toys, and the reason I felt I was able to do it was 3D printing. So because 3D printing helped me really come from my head into a real prototype, and then the tooling and then injection molding for mass production. I'll talk more about that stuff later. What I did want to show right now, let's see, let me finish my introduction, I guess. You can learn more about my stuff on Aiman Akhtar. So aiman3d.com is my site. You can check out a bunch of my 3D print work. I've worked all over Los Angeles for the past year doing 3D printing for large-scale sculpture. That's one's with an Overwatch statue with Alliance Studio, as well as small-scale stop-motion animation 3D printing for Stupid Buddy Studios. Now I'm even doing even smaller scale. I'm doing miniatures with the guys that do Hero Forge. If you haven't checked out this site, awesome company. It basically helps you design 3D printed miniature tabletop collectibles for Dungeons and Dragons and all sorts of your tabletop gaming. You can pick your character, you can pick all sorts of body measurements and attributes. You can pick their weapons and really customize them to be your character. And then we'll print it out for you. So it's an exciting gig. Happy to be on it. If you guys want to learn more about 3D printing in general and all the stuff that I cover as far as jewelry, wearables, 3D printing characters for print, I teach a class called 3D Printing for ZBrush Artists on Mold 3D Academy. So you can go to Mold 3D Academy, go to all classes, self-paced, and 3D printing for ZBrush Artists. And there's 8 weeks of lectures there, so you really get your money's worth, and you can see a bunch of my student work. All right. Done with that, done with that. Okay. Lastly, if you want to follow my streaming, I stream every Monday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., and you can follow along here. And you can see on pixelogic.com, ZBrushLIVE, author Aiman Akhtar, all of the stuff. You can see my previous streams for one, and that's what I wanted to start off with, because I'm switching gears today. For the past few weeks, I've been working on my Fungus Ores coming up with new designs. So I came up with this one you can see on screen here, which is a Stegosaurus. And I wanted to mix that up with a different mushroom. And so that's the first one I did. Then I did a Dilophosaurus mixed with the pig's ear mushroom. You know, the Dilophosaurus, the big frilly neck one. Um, and so now, last week I talked about 3D printing and exporting VRML files from ZBrush. So basically coloring in ZBrush, poly painting, doing a whole UV map, exporting out a VRML, and I wanted to give you guys an update on that and where it ended up, because it ended up on Shapeways. So I haven't actually posted this model for sale or anything, but Shapeways is a great tool for me to be able to do testing and see what's going on. Let's see here. Okay, cool. All right. That is good, that is good. Just checking up on the side screen here. Your Twitch. Cool. Hi guys on Twitch and Facebook. Alright guys, I'm here, so if you have any questions, just put them in the chat window, and as I talk, I will keep coming back to it. Okay. Give me 1 sec. I'm actually going to make a post that I'm streaming live right now. Streaming live ZBrush. You guys can watch me do this. "3D printing ideas to reality." I thought of several names for this stream, but that one just kind of stuck, because that's what it's all about, really. It's taking something that doesn't exist and making it real. Alright. Too many exclamation marks. One is good. Okay. So, what else should we talk about? This guy. So, if you were watching last week, I can pull it up over here. I showed you guys how to export from ZBrush to a VRML file, which you need to export as a zip, and VRML retains the color information. So when you upload to Shapeways, it brings in that color information, and you can print in color using Shapeways with their sandstone options. There's full color sandstone. It's not the best color 3D printing. It's pretty good. It's getting better every year. But they have natural sandstone, glossy sandstone, matte sandstone, and you can see if there's any issues with the model. You can see the price that they line up for it. So I uploaded a couple of models yesterday. I think this one was just too small. So let's take a look at this one. That takes a second to buffer in and show up. All right, they're showing up now. Good to see some familiar faces on here. Tomas from Pixelogic. What's going on, Tomas? It's probably Thomas, but I'm just going to say Tomas because it sounds fun. All right, so let's see the sandstone here. Still some issues, but I did order this from them, and so it should be arriving next week. Shapeways takes about a week to 2 weeks to send your models, and I use it as part of my prototype stage, because for me, I'm taking something, you know, that I've sculpted and making it 3D printed. So first step I do is I start with just a really basic print, and for those of you that are wondering, I use a Form 2 3D printer for all of my fine detail SLA stuff. That's stereolithography. liquid resin based printing, and that's printing on my Form 2. You can see right there. There's actually a new print in there I need to remove. And for my other big stuff, I use an FDM 3D printer, a Race 3D N2 Plus. So it's a big guy, 12 by 12 by 24 inches. So this is much better for my prototyping and large-scale printing, and the Form 2 is better for fine detail and high-resolution stuff. In any case, let's see here. You minimize these windows along the sides. You can follow along with what's going on. Cool. Tomas is saying it's Toma. Really enjoy your streams. Thanks, man. Good to have a fan. Okay, so back at it. Here's the sandstone. Let's see what we can see the issues with this guy. So I'm getting some wall thickness warnings. Let's see what those are. You can see here's the render that Shapeways provides for you. And this is based on the export out of ZBrush. The 3D model, it was exported as a VRML file, and the texture that went along with it. So I can actually load that up to show you guys. I'm excited for the Jurassic World movie. Always had a thing for dinos, probably since Jurassic Park. There we go. Stream in. So here's my export, and you can see I did a really quick UV map in ZBrush, just using the UV Master plugin, and plug that into Shapeways along with the VRML export, which you can see you have to put into a zip and then upload to Shapeways. And then it shows up like this. We can check out the wall thickness to see what it's saying. Okay. There we go. All right, so on the wall thickness, you can see what areas Shapeways flags as problem areas. I've got these spines on the back of the Stegosaurus tail, so those are showing up as they might be way too thin at this scale. And the toes here, those might be too thin. The red areas obviously signify problem, danger, and yellow, passable, green, A-OK. Yeah, Shapeways got a minimum wall thickness here of 2 millimeters, and some of these are smaller than that at the scale I've printed. However, I did send them through the repair process when I uploaded to Preform, and then also through Mesh Mixer when I fixed that stuff up. So it fixes any holes in the mesh, fixes any self-intersections, triangles, double triangles, degenerate faces, overlapping shells. We use Shapeways all the time at work too to just make sure that models are going to print. And then you actually have to try to print test them. So despite it giving these warnings, I submitted the model for print and I've got it shipping to me. So I'm going to switch gears from this project and pick up on my Fungus Ores next week. And I wanted to show you guys a couple other things today. So if you do want to actually catch up on that and my previous streams, you can go to pixelogic.com/ZBrushLIVE. And let me show you something cool here. You can see the streams. And if you go to Pixelogic ZBrushLIVE Author, or at least I thought that was it. Let's see, presenters. Okay, so Pixelogic ZBrushLIVE Presenters, you can see previous streams from so many awesome artists. Shane Olson's on here, Ashley Adams, Danny Mac, Tomas Whittlebach. So if you scroll all the way down, because I'm one of the newbies, you can check out my schedule and see my old streams. And you can catch up with the process on that. And next week I'll pick up back on Fungus Ores. All right, so what am I talking about this week? Well, what I wanted to show you guys was another side project of mine that I've been building up steam on, and I've got to start getting really into it. So let's pull up some stuff. All right, so I had a fun idea, which was to cosplay as Aquaman, but not just as Aquaman, but actually make it interesting, kind of make my own custom suit. So I did like how should you say, a test photo shoot. That's me in a pool in Palm Springs last weekend, and my wife stuck her hand into the pool and took a photo, and I just flailed around for a bit and figured out how I'd like to do this. And I have a friend, Jessica Drew, who's hosting an underwater workshop. And this is the kind of thing that happens sometimes. You just have to be aware of it. Let's see here. I'll show you guys what the plan is first. So that's Jess in her workshop page, and she's doing it along with Brett Stanley, the underwater photographer. And I signed up with these guys to have a underwater photo shoot with a professional photographer, with a professional model, kind of training and showing me how to make a good photo underwater. And so I'm looking forward to this. I'm doing this later this June, so I've got to get on to making the costume. You can check out Brett's stuff on his site. It says underwater-photographer.com. So my plan was to kind of start with an idea and then take it into reality using 3D printing. So this is just the idea. It's a dude in tights in a pool. So now how do you make that better? And the way to make that better is to just come up with your own design, infuse it with something that you haven't seen before, and do it your way. And so I started with, let's see here. I started coming up with some designs. And I'll show you what I've got in mind, and then let's see how much of it actually translates into real life. Let's make sure you guys are getting this on the stream. All right, Twitch looks good. Facebook also looks good. Mark Burge is asking a question. Do the colors come out that bright generally? You're probably referring to the colors of the Fungus Ore that I showed earlier, bright green and yellow. It depends. It really depends what Shapeways can do and what material you pick. Sometimes if you pick matte color sandstone, the color will look slightly different than, say, shiny color sandstone. But I like to make things a bit more bright and saturated because through that printing process it might dull a little bit, Cool. All right, so here's the start of my scaling and design for the suit. I'm going to make a whole scale mail suit, and there'll be a bit of a feature here with this main front end, and some of you might already be able to guess what's going on, recognizing this pattern from the Thanos Infinity War gauntlet. And I'm going to kind of make an Infinity War suit for Aquaman. The theme being that Aquaman's been kind of relegated to the realms of the internet where they joke about him a lot because he's kind of a useless superhero outside of the water. Although he's recently been made more badass by Jason Momoa, the guy who played Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones. However, I wanted to make it even more badass by making like a really kick-ass crazy suit and powering up Aquaman with the power of all the Infinity Gems. Kind of a weird crossover thing. But that's kind of, taking an idea to reality, and that's the point of these side projects. They help keep you sane when you've got all these other things stressing you out and all these other projects and all these other clients, which I'm always juggling. So I'm always juggling multiple 3D printing projects at a time. Let me show you guys some stuff that I've already done for this project. Let's see, pull up OBS and make this screen a bit larger. There we go. All right, so what I started with is a trident. You can see how big this guy is as compared to me. If I back up a little bit, move this around. There's the bottom, there's the top, and it stands a bit taller than me. It stands about 6 feet, almost 7 feet tall. And how did I 3D print something this big? I just used this guy, the Raise 3D N2 Plus, and I printed it in pieces. If you take a closer look here at the trident, you can see where I've epoxied and joined the tips of the trident. So feels really massive. Like this is just the size of my head. You know? Whenever I do this, I'm reminded of Thundercats. And then now there's a controversy with the new Thundercats, which I'd be interested in your opinion. What do you guys think of the new Thundercats? Let's type it in the stream. All right, let me show you more pieces of this. Here's a cylinder and another cylinder and the bottom and the dowel, the wooden dowel that's going to be basically the inside support structure for this. You can see all the different pieces here. So that's how you print something really big. You segment it up, you slice it, you key it, you engineer and think about where you're going to hollow it, how you're going to hollow it, and how to basically make these pieces fit together. You can see this end has a bit of a slice, so it can only really fit in one direction. And the tip. So I've got my prop, and I'm going to finish sanding it, and I'm going to finish epoxying it and fixing up this seam that's up at the tip. I'm going to glue all these pieces together with the epoxy, two-part epoxy. It's generally pretty strong, and I'll use that as my prop, and I'll spray paint it gold. And I'll show you this in the next stream. It'll already probably be done. But this is the spray paint that I used. Let me put this down. Use both my hands. Alright. So I like to use the Tamiya color paints. Might be a bit hard to see on the stream. But this is Tamiya Black, just a full spray paint can. And then this one is Tamiya Light Sand Metallic. And first you got to go over everything with a nice coat of black and then go over it with the metallic gold, and it'll really help to shine. It'll pop that metal color a lot. So next week when you tune into the stream, you'll probably see it already colored. That's the trident. Now I'm starting with the suit. And a couple weeks ago I did my first test with how I'm going to be pulling off this scale look. And what I'm going to be using, if you take a close look onto the camera, I'll kind of come up to the camera and block with my shirt so you can see. I'm printing with a mesh. So there's this mesh which is kind of pretty porous. Take a close look at it. And what I'm doing is, here's the belt, at least the front part of the belt. You can see it'll come on like that. You can see it's articulated, despite the fact that none of these pieces are actually connected to each other. And that's because they're connected using the wire mesh. And this was done by printing on my Raise 3D back here, N2 Plus. The first few layers, I'd say maybe the first 2 hours, I just printed as is. Then I paused the printer. So you can pause these guys, and that's one good thing about FDMs, is that you can pause them and then lay kind of a netting on top of it. And then it kind of resumes printing, fusing the top and the bottom layer through the netting. And so then you have a fully articulated piece that prints out just like that. So I've got the start of the belt here, all articulated. I've got the side pieces as well. You can see how they bend and move. That'll kind of get attached onto the side of the belt. And I'm going to be stitching all of this onto a base. So this one will be my first test. I'm going to spray paint this probably later today. And I'll try attaching this to my, or stitching this to my shirt that I'll be using. Here's the base of the costume. I got some fish scale tights. These should be interesting. And then I got a shirt that I picked up yesterday. It's kind of like an Under Armour kind of shirt. It's a long shirt, long sleeves, pretty porous, but I feel like it's very skin tight. It makes me feel like a superhero when I put it on. And so this will be my base. to put this stuff onto. Like you can see like that. So as the weeks go on, I'm probably going to try to wrap this up in the next 2 weeks or so. Let's shrink this back down. All right. So now that I've got the trident and I've got my big prop, and now that I've got the first start to a belt and some suit and a base to kind of stitch everything onto, stitch the wire meshes onto, next thought is to actually make a custom suit. So you might be wondering where I got this base mesh, which looks oddly like me but very blurred, and I will show you. I got the base mesh using a software called Agisoft PhotoScan. Just downloaded it and I'm trying to implement it in my workflow. This is an experiment for me. I've never used Agisoft Scan professionally before, but it seemed like a good project to start trying out photogrammetry on. And you can see a bunch of photos that my wife took of me. You can see each of these little blue squares and rectangles represents a photo or location of a photo. So she basically walked around me taking a photo multiple times. And actually, if you're interested, I can show you guys this workflow really quickly because it doesn't take that long to show. All right, Twitch, Facebook, interested in seeing Agisoft workflow to ZBrush? Let me know in the chat and I will bounce it. In the meanwhile, let me look at your questions. John Rigudo says, brilliant, pausing the printer and then embedding the mesh. Thank you, Joanne. Wasn't my idea originally. I think the original idea was from a guy in a makerspace in Los Angeles. And then I saw a video online with Uncle Jesse on how to 3D print on fabric. And so this is basically me taking this idea to the nth extreme because I'm insane and printing a full suit. So what Uncle Jesse did was he showed these dragon scales, which I believe I've got here, by Shori Design on Thingiverse. And you can download this mesh for free from Thingiverse and try it out and, you know, play with it yourself if you've got an FDM printer. Printing on, you know, a porous fabric, all these scales that are separate all combine into this whole articulated mesh, which I thought was a brilliant idea as well, so I'm kind of trying to take it to the next level. Let's see. Always give credit when credit is due. My policy. All right. Polysculpt is saying, Jessica is with Joseph Druss, our presenter for the ZBrush Summit Sculpt Off, and commenting on the Sculpt Off. Yeah, she's been doing that for a couple of years. She's awesome at it. And Joseph too, man, that guy is just talent in a box. A lot of talent in a small box, I guess. ZBrush Summit is going to be this fall, I'd say, maybe September-ish. Let's see, ZBrush Summit 2018. I'm excited to go to it for sure. Not sure if I'll be participating in the Sculpt Off or anything like that this time. Last year I missed it because I was at Trojan Horse Expo in Portugal. Wanted to fly over to the other side of the world to hang out. There's Jess and Joseph presenting in the live Sculpt Off. But I highly recommend checking this out, guys. It's like a whole bunch of inspiration. Actually, I caught the tail end of it last year where I showed up for the last day. I flew back from Portugal and showed up the next morning jet lag to the summit because it's that awesome of a summit. All right, Characterland AG is asking, I'm sure that works better on a bed that does not move in Y but only in Z for mesh printing. Depends. I use clips to kind of clip on the mesh along the side, so it didn't really matter if it was moving up and down. But FDM printers don't move up and down that much. Stereolithography printers like the Form 2, they may move up and down because there's wipers, but not with SLA printers necessarily. Mark's asking, do you think that mesh idea would work on a less advanced printer, like just start a print on the mesh? You don't want to do that. You want to start printing as is, and I think a less advanced FDM printer would do the trick. But just start printing as is. You know, go through the first hour or two, or maybe first 50 or 100 layers without messing with any settings. Then pause the printer, then add the mesh, because you want it to fuse from the bottom and the top, not just the bottom. All right, looks like some people want to see my stuff here for Agisoft. So I'm actually just going to open a new scene and show you guys how I do this workflow from Agisoft to ZBrush and then the ZBrush concept stage. All right, so with the brand new Agisoft open, I'm going to add a chunk and add photos. Navigate down to this photo set, my new place, and bring in all those photos. There's 87 cameras, all unaligned. You can see if you double click on any of the photos what that looks like. So not the best photos for photogrammetry. There's a lot of junk in the background. The lighting is really uneven, like the backlight is just, there is none. So ideally for photogrammetry you have to have consistency. You should use like a digital SLR with camera raw, like finest settings, and then consistent lighting all the way across and consistent camera angle all the way across and steps. And that intersection of all those images is how photogrammetry generates a 3D model. So this is probably not going to have the best results, but let's try. So I'm going to select all these cameras. I'm going to scroll down to Workflow and click on Aligned Photos. That's step one. I'm technically skipping a step because the first step, if you really want to do it properly, is to mask out the photos with any unnecessary information. So you actually draw a mask along each photo, or you prep it in Photoshop or import it in for what areas you don't want to be considered. Like my kitchen, for example, and all these boxes, because I just moved into this place a couple weeks ago, so we're still unpacking. So I'd want to first create a mask so that everything else that's not necessary would not be counted. But in this case, since I'm just kind of showing for a demo, I'm going to start by aligning the photos and show you how Agisoft thinks about it and how it generates a scan for you to start working on. Rico Envision is asking, how's it called, the software? It's called Agisoft, A-G-I-S-O-F-T PhotoScan. Let's see, pull that up for you. Here's the Agisoft website. It's just agisoft.com. You can use it for photogrammetry of environments, of people, obviously. Download a free 30-day trial and just try it out. That's how you learn new things, by trying new software all the time. You got to keep pushing yourself. Okay. Polysculpt saying, yes, end of September. The ZBrush Summit this year is from September 27th through the 30th. All right, so Agisoft was able to align all those photos despite me not doing any masking right now. It's a relatively smart software. I'm going to switch to, let's see, rotate. And you can see the point cloud it generates. All those blue squares or rectangles are cameras. You can see if I'm holding shift and middle mouse scrolling, you can increase or decrease the size of those cameras to really check the position of it all. So obviously the more photos the better. Like I said, the more camera resolution the better, the more consistency in lighting the better. But for now, this is pretty good. I'm going to shrink the size of those cameras a little bit and zoom out. You can see the point cloud without masking generates a bunch of my kitchen, the floor, the back room here. That's the room I'm currently streaming out of right there. And I don't want any of that in the scan, because otherwise it'll just generate a really heavy mesh. So I'm going to switch to the rectangular marquee tool, zoom out, and then just delete any of this unnecessary stuff. Look at how much stuff it calculates, really, really spatial. So I'm just zooming out and deleting anything I don't want as part of my scan. It's going to take a sec. Don't want any of these unnecessary points. But you also want to make sure you don't select these cameras by mistake. Don't like how you have to actually switch to the rotate tool in order to rotate around the interface in Agisoft. Maybe that's just a noob thing with me because I'm not that familiar with the software. But what I like is when you're not that familiar with the software and you can still get good results. That's how you know software is doing a good job. Good user experience. I feel like ZBrush definitely has that. Although ZBrush, it takes a while to switch gears from other 3D applications and think about it more as its own software. Excuse me. What I mean by that is that ZBrush is kind of built differently from other software where, other software you have this world, you've got like an environment that the model or item that you're working on is brought in. But ZBrush, your model, your tool is everything. So you have to make that switch in your head. And it takes people that studied Max or Maya a little bit of, switching up in order to understand how to work in ZBrush well. All right, so I could keep deleting these little points forever. It's kind of hard with the rectangular selection, so I'm going to switch to freeform. Just grab a bunch of this. Whoop. Again, got to be careful not to select the cameras. All right, so now I'd say that's good enough for our purposes. Rotate to the front. So you can see this is a point cloud right now. It's not really the mesh that's being generated. So let's take it to the next step. What you've got to do is with these tie points selected, go to workflow and build dense cloud. So basically everything you need to do is in the workflow tab. It's a really easy software in that sense. You add the photos, align the photos, build the dense mesh cloud, and then build a mesh. So let's build the dense cloud first. I'm going to switch this to just medium so it does it kind of quickly rather than ultra high. Raccoon Vision saying it would be great if you can block the cameras. Probably is possible. There's got to be a way to just turn off the cameras and only be looking at the point cloud. And again, forgive my newness to this software. John Raguda saying, probably would be good to take the pics against a blue or green screen. Agreed, because then you can color key out and make your mask that way. I've done blue screen and green screen work before. Unfortunately, I don't own a really big one. And what I learned with Agisoft PhotoScan with my testing, because I've done a few tests now, is you can't do it against one backdrop. Say if you had one wall that was green screen, and then you just spin around while the person that's taking the photo stays static. That doesn't work really well. Agisoft likes intersection from multiple angles to create this photogrammetry. So a person really needs to walk all the way around, or you need to have a camera rig set up with tripods or kind of a custom built wall with, lighting everywhere to even everything out. And all of that takes too much setup. So you can go through all those steps and you can set up a perfect green screen wall around you and perfect lighting, but Agisoft is smart enough to get you the results that you want with some planning. So I'm just going to let it generate its dense point cloud. Keep answering your questions. Hi, Twitch. All right, so Arcade Retro is asking, what software is this? Not Edge Shift, it's Agisoft. Yes, thank you, Belfrio. And that is right here, agisoft.com. Give it a sec to generate this point cloud. Kasaba Tot on Facebook is saying, I do photogrammetry for work. That's awesome. I used to be threatened by photogrammetry. Were any 3D modelers here threatened by photogrammetry when it first started coming out onto the scene maybe like 4 or 5 years ago? Because as a modeler, that's kind of your job, is to make things. And I started in commercials. I did commercial 3D modeling for advertising and print and prototyping for, I'd say, 4 or 5 years in Chicago when I graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 3D and 3D animation. And so originally I was brought on to, help ad campaigns. And it was like, hey, make this McDonald's packaging, or make this secret deodorant can or bottle, or new shampoo bottle, or razor, or something like that, or phone, a lot of phones. And with photogrammetry, that kind of is threatening because it kind of gets rid of the need to have to model everything from scratch, have to measure everything with calipers, make sure you create it perfectly in 3D, an accurate facsimile of the real world model or real world prototype. And photogrammetry kind of solves some of those problems, and it does it faster. So originally, though I was threatened by it, I realized very soon as a modeler, thank God I don't have to model all of these boring projects anymore. Boring obviously depends on your perspective, but when you keep doing commercials for a really long time, you realize that there's only so much you can do making things that literally any model can do or any software can do, and that photogrammetry kind of frees you up so you don't have to make things that already exist. You could just say this water bottle, you could take photos and make an accurate scan that you can then retopologize, and then you've got your model. It's a new workflow. It's a new toolkit in our belt, All right, so continuing on with this, here's the dense cloud. So I'm going to go to now build mesh. You can set your resolution, high, medium, and low. I'll just set it to high, see what happens. All right. My friend Jay's on here watching me stream going, my eyes! Javon Town says, cheaters! You can say photogrammetry is cheating, but it's part of our toolkit, so use what you can. Get the accurate measurements. And trust me, it doesn't get you the best results unless you do it right. Sabatat is saying, I'd rather take photos outside in overcast lighting. Good call. I'll do that next time. All right, this mesh is almost generated. It's saying it helps clean up the point cloud before making a geometry. Yep, definitely. All right, so there we go. Here's the 3D model that was generated, and look at that. Obviously, I did it in medium to low resolution, and it's based off of really bad photos, so you can see it's a pretty bad scan. Oftentimes, if you don't plan well, and if your lighting conditions aren't optimal and your photos aren't optimal, you get bad scans. But what's good about it is that you get accurate proportions. And that's what matters to me as a 3D printing artist, is the accurate proportions of what my body is. So you can see the mesh cloud, despite deleting a bunch of the missing point cloud meshes, I still get a bunch of geo. So I can select them now using the same tool. And now it selects the faces. And I can just delete those. So toss a bunch of this unnecessary geo, and I'm pretty sure I can toss the cameras now because I've got this mesh already generated. Let's try it. Yeah, pretty good. And looks like it's not deleting the cameras anyway. All right, so now you basically have to go in and clean up your model a bit more again to just get rid of any junk that you don't want. You don't want this hipster man bun thing I've got going on to translate into this suit. So I'll move that aside. And that's not bad. That's a good start for a scan. And oftentimes, if you guys have ever worked with scanning data, because I have on many projects, sometimes you don't get much better than this. hopefully with Kasaba taught. Feel free to contact me for some more tips. I may do that, sir. If you hire him, you're going to get much better results than these. Let's toss all of this stuff that we don't need. Whoop. Toss some of that. All right, that looks pretty good as our starting point. I could keep cleaning up forever. Okay, so there's our model base that we just generated using photogrammetry, and we're going to use it to get accurate proportions for when we build out our design in our suit. I mean, if you're building something for someone, it should really, you know, line up to them perfectly. A good example is this dress in the back, and that's a dress that I made for Jessica. I did like a model shoot with her, and I can show you guys what that looks like. Let's see here, where is my ZBrush streaming folder? So here's the dress. You can see back here in my corner, and there's Jessica modeling it. And the way I started that one, it was a commission for 3D World magazine over 2 years now, maybe 3 years ago. And the way I did it was we got a scan of Jessica by the guys at Co-Create here in Pasadena and Los Angeles. And based on that scan, I built this model to fit her. And she helped out too because she's an awesome 3D modeler with some of these pieces. And I got a friend of mine, Igor Nezovich, to donate some of his jewelry pieces, Alienologies, his jewelry line. And we came up with this really interesting look. It was described after I posted it as kind of a H.R. Geiger, fairy or something futuristic, I was going for fashion runway in the future. So you can see all the LED lights I embedded into it to make this dress kind of glow. And it's a pretty awesome lamp, actually, even though it's gotten a bit damaged and moving over the years. But I've done this based on my experience, so I know that you should try to build off of a scan. So going back to it, there's the scan. Not the best one. The guys at Co-Create gave me a much better one because they're using Artec 3D scanners. They're kind of like more of the higher end stuff. Artec 3D. Add. There we go. So Artec is a company that makes all these professional 3D scanners. You can see the EVA, the Space Spider, Leo. I think the EVA is the one that we used. And you can see it's a scanner where you can walk around a subject and it'll use photogrammetry to generate a 3D model on the fly. So you can just have it connected to a phone or iPad, walk around a person or a space, and it captures it and automatically generates the 3D model. So you don't have to use Agisoft as much, but you can see pretty hefty price tag. So it's not really for, average consumers, whereas Agisoft is relatively cheap. I think it's only a couple $100 to try it out. And the educational license is even cheaper, and you can try the free trial, which I'm a big proponent of. Free trials all the way. That's how you learn. So in any case, there's the scan. I've generated the 3D model. And so what I can do now is click on File, Export, and export the model. So let's call this Scan 2. Save it as an OBJ, and you can save vertex colors and normals. Colors don't matter to us much at all right now, and we didn't even use the high resolution colors. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to import in that scan now into ZBrush. Draw it out. And you can see at the low resolution that we did it, because that was really low resolution. I should have done high resolution, but it gets the point across. This is what you get. Really janky, really, weird looking, but don't use this as an advertisement for Agisoft. This is my inexperience with scanning and newness to it, but that's what kind of 3D printing and using technology and trying to make your ideas to reality is all about. It's pushing what you can do constantly. So I'm gonna now start by rotating this model into place, kind of aligning it, kind of XYZ, just to make it easier to work on. There we go. These notifications that keep popping up. And now I'm in draw mode, and I can start by just doing a geometry Dynamesh. You can use your clip and curve and select lasso brushes now to clean up further. Delete hidden, Dynamesh again. Delete hidden, Dynamesh again. And based on, your understanding of human anatomy, you can sculpt and fix things. I can give myself my skull back and smooth areas out as well. Obviously, if you got a better scan, you wouldn't have to do this as much. But I've thought there's always been some cleanup in pretty much every scan I've worked on. Wish I could turn off these notifications sometimes with Windows. It gets annoying. But I've been trying to turn those off. Oh. So I'm just kind of select lassoing, holding Control Shift, letting go of Shift to invert the selection, deleting hidden, and then Dynameshing to merge that geo. And you can see the scan is far from perfect, but it gives me a good base. And this is not as good as my previous scan was. But you can use all of your favorite sculpting tools now to refine and kind of fix the sculpt. Just trying to use the clip brushes here without clipping too much. There we go. Dynameshing. And then just sculpt smoothing and fixing. So that's basically your starting point, is the scan that you generate. And delete any of the junk again. Junk in the trunk there. All right. And that's your starting point for any kind of suit. It's what I recommend in any case. So, getting back to mine, so here's the high resolution scan that I did, and it's a bit better. And you can see I've got a lot more detail here. These are those same photos that generated this scan. So it really depends, even with janky photos, you can get your needs met. And that's what I needed here. I needed to make sure that I get the proportions accurate. And then from that point now, I can start building out my suit so that it's proportionate to me. What I'm likely going to do is separate these scales into multiple patches. Kind of like you see, I've started to just add some on and color code them. And the way I did that was I made one. So I started by making kind of like the dragon scales model I showed you earlier on Thingiverse, because I wanted a really scaly suit. But then that kind of dragon scale is way too big and way too sharp. Like if I tried this on my model, let me show you. I can switch to my insert mesh brush that I created. These spikes are really big, and really they just make it a lot more evil as opposed to fish scaly. They look like dragon scales, you know what I mean? And so that wasn't working for me as well. So I updated that sculpt and kind of shrunk it down a bit from there to there. So it's kind of a bit easier, lighter, and it's got a bit more style to it. And then from there, I went to brush menu here and said create insert mesh. And you can append that onto your previous one. So now you've got a custom insert mesh brush. I'm actually going to save that because I didn't save that earlier. Let me see. Brush with that selected, save as insert mesh scale 1. And so you can save your brushes and come back to them. All right. So don't want those sharp scales. I want these guys that are more flat against the body. And what I'm going to do is use the insert mesh brush technique to kind of lay out my design and figure it out in ZBrush and figure it out as I go, because I don't really have a concept artist giving me a specific plan. I'm just kind of coming up with it on the fly. And that's one thing I like about ZBrush as a design tool. It lets you figure things out on your own. All right, let me check on the chat here. See if you guys are asking any more questions. All right, Quantum Tonk is asking, can I show us how a good scan would look like? Absolutely. How should I show you a good scan? Let's see, 10 scans. All right, so if you guys want to check out some really good scans, let's see, I think 1024 is a company that does some scanning. And you can check out their 3D scanning, and you can see what their lighting setup looks like. Now that's a professional, highly sought after photogrammetry setup. You can scan people in there, you can scan poses, you can scan people dancing, and it'll, take photos for every nanosecond. Like, that's a professional setup, and that yields you professional results. So if you go to their 3D scanning page, that's 1024.info, you can download a scan. So there's their sample scan. And you can see it's just a guy in kind of relaxed T-pose, but with all of his clothing on, with the normal mesh, and it kind of, with a retopologized, it looks like a ZBrush remeshed kind of mesh. And they give you all of this for free as an asset. This is really high res, so you can see their scan detail is off the charts. And you could probably get this, maybe not this well, but a reasonable facsimile of this high resolution detail using Agisoft, but plugging in higher resolution photos, like I said, with DSLRs, shot with using camera raw, and multiple exposures. Try to get a really good photo, even lighting, and you can generate even texture maps too. Generate normals. If you've got UVs, you can kind of plug all of it in and you're set. And so 1024's got their 3D scan store, which I just love perusing time to time to see all the latest scans. And so hope that answered your question, Quantum Thonk. There's a lot of really awesome scans here. Male, female, different pose set. They've got bodybuilders. They've got heavy set people, really fit people, business casual, and really all sorts of characters. And as we go along, this kind of scanning is becoming more and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just commonplace, I guess. Love this one. Look at this awesome bodybuilder photo scan. And so there exist high-resolution photo scans for a lot of stuff. So you don't have to do it yourself, but it's, again, if you do start learning the technology, playing around with the tools, it's not that hard to pick up, and you get to add another toolkit to your belt. Yeah, all right, so high-resolution scans on there, as well as many other sites on the internet. You can see some really high-res scans. Check it out on Facebook. Okay. Characterline AG is asking, how would you flatten out the scales after doing them on the body so they're flat to print on the mesh fabric on the bed? And Mark Burge is asking, I'd be interested in how you deal with scale of the export in order to match to your body size. You do that in the 3D print exporter. So both of those are similar questions. You're asking about future steps in this project. Once I've got the design more laid out, then I'll start figuring out how to make these patches more printable, because obviously each of these patches of scales will need to be printed out flat. So they'll need to be taken from their curve shape right now, flattened out as a patch, and then printed. So what I'm going to do is use my design, and really it's all about the flow of these scales. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to separate and differentiate these. I've got the deltoid patch here, and I've got the chest patch, the pectoral patch here. And I'm still refining all of these. It's far from it right now. But what I'm going to do is keep refining the design right now, figuring out the flow, not being too, I don't know, picky about where everything lays, where it'll be 3D printable or not, because right now I'm not worried about 3D printing it. Right now I'm just kind of designing. So at this stage, you can think of this more as ZBrush for concept design rather than ZBrush for final prototype, final print. Because this is just the first step. Once I've figured out the design more, then I'll tackle how to flatten it out for print. And there's a couple of ways I could do this. Just thinking about it out loud in my head. I could export all these scales individually because they're all kind of individual scales right now. I could do auto groups on this, so I'd really make sure that each of those scales is auto grouped and on its own layer. And then I could maybe bring them into Maya and modify freeze transformation on all of these, center pivot on all of these, do a geometry constraint on all of these onto a curved surface, and then do a blend shape of that curved surface so that it flattens out. And because of that geometry constraint, maybe each of those scales that were on the geometry would also flatten out. Now this may not work, but in theory it'll work. So I've got some testing to do. I'm just going to continue rotating these now that I look at it. Turn off solo mode. You can see I'm also trying to keep them pretty spaced out. This might change because I might do the first patch just as a test print and then see how patchy it is, because if it is too much space in the middle, then it might not look good, So I might want to stack those scales a lot closer to each other. And another thing I might want to do once I'm happy with it, is go to geometry deformations and crank up the inflate. And that will give me a much more dense packed result. Smooth that out. Round it out a bit more. It's not as sharp, but I think that might look cooler. So for now, I'm just going to kind of keep working the design, figuring out my patches, figuring out my workflow, and then later implement them into the actual design. The other aspect is this kind of neck piece that I started concepting. And you can guess based on the design that it is based on Panos' Infinity Gauntlet. So I'm going to kind of make Aquaman, who's kind of a nerf superhero, a badass by giving him the Infinity Gauntlet. We'll see if it works out. But I already had this model set up from a previous model that I had made. And I can show you guys that too, if you're interested. Let's see, navigate here. My other monitor, over to my other projects, navigate over to the Panos Gauntlet here. So this is kind of what I imagine mixing my design in with. So I kind of want to make a really badass Aquaman mixed with the Infinity Gauntlet. The idea is to have this mixed in with all that scale mesh armor, mixed in with the trident. And I'll see, I might dye my hair. We'll see. But here's the model that I originally had made for my dog, Kuma. And I made him a 3D printed Infinity Gauntlet piece, like a collar that he could walk around in. Let's see, I think I've got another photo somewhere here. May not. But this was kind of my plan with 3D printing as wearables. I didn't have a time to scan Kuma, so I actually made a 3D version of him, measuring him with a little tape measure, and then put this on. And he's actually a really mellow corgi, so it was very easy. He lets me do anything. For treats, he'll basically let you put anything on it, clothing-wise. But I did that using the Raise 3D as well. And this all printed in one piece. So actually, if you want to follow more of my projects on that end, you can go to Instagram.com, Aiman Akhtar 3D. And it's kind of my art account mixed with a bit of personal stuff. But if you scroll down here, you can see that one where the time stone is on the back, the rest of the stones in the front. And here you can see how it was printed on my N2 Plus all in one piece. And so I had this asset left over, so I kind of just modified it to my scan that I just did, the new one. And here you can see the belt that I did earlier with the mesh fiber kind of built in. Play the video for you guys. Looking at some more of your questions. Quantum Tonks asking on Twitch, by the way, did you start hard surface modeling like in Maya when I first started and then start learning ZBrush? Yep, that's how I started. I was doing Maya for 8 years before I really got the hang of it. It's a complicated piece of software that can do a lot of things. But I started learning 3D in high school because I kind of got obsessed with Jurassic Park and 3D films and CGI and Pixar and Disney films in general. And so I decided early on that I wanted to be in the entertainment industry as, you know, in animation, as in sculpting. And then recently I kind of really got into 3D printing because I realized what matters to me is just being a sculptor more than anything at this point in time. So ZBrush helps me be a sculptor, whereas other 3D software I felt were more technical and more based on vertices and edges, and they were very built, you know, kind of in the 80s. So they were built as for modeling and surfacing with NURBS and such. You know, it was a very different workflow. You had to make splines, you had to make surfaces and stitch them together. Because I did a lot of automotive modeling in the beginning, a lot of cars, spaceships, and I got to work on Harley Davidsons for a couple of years. So that was my early experience modeling, just 2 years of making bikes. So hard surface is definitely a good base to start from, but I feel like I'm more of an organic sculptor, or even the hard surface stuff that I do, I think about it kind of organically. So ZBrush is a better fit for me. All right. So yeah, if you guys want to follow me and see my stuff online, that's Aiman Akhtar 3D on Instagram. And I kind of post these videos time to time to show the stuff that I'm, you know, currently working on, whatever harebrained projects I have in mind. All right. Hyperion Armory on Twitch is asking, do you think making smaller scales at the edges, progressively increasing the size of the center, would give you more of an organic look, kind of like fish scales? That's an excellent point, Hyperion Armory. I'm definitely going to take you up on that. And that's all part of the design phase. This one was a relatively simple design. I knocked this project out in a weekend, printed it up, went to a went to a kind of a gemstone store here in Los Angeles in the jewelry district and picked these guys up and epoxied them on and finished it really quickly, did the photo shoot over the next weekend. So some projects are really quick. Other projects you need to design and think about. So this is more of still the design phase. And Hyperion Armory's point was, right now, all of these scales are relatively the same size. So what if, instead of having them all be the same size, I did some smaller ones? And one thing that I've noticed over the course of a career in 3D is that size variation adds complexity. Complexity draws your eyes. And you want areas of rest. You want a good balance. You want areas of rest where you know your eyes can just go and sit on a model and be like, okay, good, there's not that much detail. I can take it in. And then you want areas of a lot of detail. And so I might add such an area to help separate some of these points. Let's see. Let me think about this. Maybe right here for the trapezius, I'll add some smaller scales. And you can see I'm just kind of using the insert mesh brush and drawing them on one by one. You can go into the ZBrush settings to really adjust how these are drawn out. But I think this would be actually a pretty nice way of doing it. One by one. Because if I do kind of turn on curve and this have them all drawn out, it'll do it how it wants to do it, and I want to be able to make sure that I can do it the way I want to do it, adding more variation as I go. And I'm going to do a bit of scale changing here as I go down this. I'm going to start scaling this up. So you can see I'm starting with smaller scales, but if I keep dragging, they get bigger and bigger. So I will make them a bit bigger here. Maybe not that one. Trying to kind of follow along with the flow of the anatomy, which means you've got to understand the flow of the anatomy, which means you've got to spend a while studying anatomy before you can break it. All right. So I could do something like this, where I have my scales go from small to large, and that can be one patch on its own, you know, like a side trapezius patch. I may have that go all the way down to the end here. You know what? Let's play some music while we're sculpting, because we've got a little bit of time to do this. I got this track. It's royalty-free music from a friend of mine, a recommendation, Jake Kemper. Let's play this. I think it's called Future Synth. Mark Bird just saying, I guess you take into account gravity, weight, etc. when doing the design. Definitely, you've got to think about all that stuff. You've got to think about weight. You've got to think about proportion. And when you're doing 3D printing for something that'll be made real, you've got to think about it like an engineer, not just like an artist. I can use my transpose tool to select these bits, move them around, really kind of get the patch that I want. Maybe fill in some of this space above as well. I might try doing a test print of one of these patches right now, just to show you guys how I'd go about it and see if it works, because it may not work right now. The other idea I had was if I had Marvelous Designer, because that's another really awesome tool for cloth and sculpting wearables. I had the idea that I was going to use Marvelous Designer to kind of drape some clothing on top of me and use Marvelous Designer stitching, because I think Marvelous Designer lays out your clothes in a kind of stitching pattern. Use that in order to flatten these pieces out as a blend shape in Maya again. And that might not work either, but that was another idea that I had. Oftentimes I can't really test all of my ideas. I have too many ideas and too many projects, and then can't finish all of them. Which is, I guess, the nature of most of us as artists. We kind of start more projects than we can finish. And that's why it's good to get other people involved and get deadlines set for yourself, and that forces you to finish. I'm definitely not a music snob. Listen to pretty much all sorts of things. So this is kind of nice. Synthwave. Future synth. Next week I'll be listening to metal. We'll see. Thanks for joining me in the stream, everyone who's here on Pixelogic with Facebook and Twitch. Hyperion Armory saying, "You are amazing. I make cosplay costume, but new to ZBrush. You make it look easy." I hope so. Experience should count for something. Should make some things easier. But no part of it is easy. You can see, just seeing my process, that I'm kind of coming up with it on the fly. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how you learn. Okay. I know I could probably come up with a script that can do this a bit faster or easier, but I am not good at scripting at all. Can't be good at everything. All right, so check this out. So I've got scales that go from small to large. And again, I'll figure out how to split these into patches later. But step one right now is to just kind of make it. See if I want to kind of continue this a bit more, or if I want to change it up and start doing larger scales right away. So oftentimes I'll draw something out, and then I'll go back and undo. All right, so you know what would be interesting is if I give myself a bit more of a six-pack, make this a bit more superhero-y. So I think what would be cool is if the scales were somehow helping, kind of thinking a bit future tech. What if the scales had some sort of nanotech ability, kind of like the new Spider-Man or Iron Man suits, where they, are individual and they can move? What if they can help propel Aquaman forward, so they kind of all move at the same time? That would be interesting. So if I'm thinking about it in those terms, I want these scales to be able to push the water a bit, which means I want them to be able to go with the flow. So what is that flow? Start changing the curve of these guys. See if that works. It might not, but worth a shot. Obviously, the smaller the scales are, the harder this process becomes because it takes much longer to lay out scales over the entire thing. So for the sake of time, I think I might do bigger scales in general once I get around to it. All right, the arm's blocking a bit of my view. And whenever that happens, just select my select lasso and hide the stuff that's blocking my view. Move that over. Get back to it. Let's see. Might select this one, move it down a bit. The scales are kind of alternating. Not really, but kind of. The one good thing is once you actually draw one of these insert meshes out, it remains active and lets you rotate when you switch tools. All right, that's looking dope. And keep in mind, I'm only going to really design half of the sides and then mirror over, because then that'll be a bit easier to manage patches. All right, let's see if you guys have any more questions here. Quantum Tonk saying, can you show us how to use the Move Scale Rotation tool, because it's confusing and different from other 3D programs? Sure. Let's see. All right. So ZBrush has a few different options for when you sculpt. You can go to your Move, Scale, and Rotate, which draws out this transpose bar, which can help you start, rotating, moving your model. Or you can turn on the Gizmo 3D, which is a new feature, which is similar to most other 3D software in that it helps you move, rotate, and scale really obviously. You can rotate along the edges here. You can scale uniformly or on the side. And you can move things around. So that's the Gizmo tool. If you turn the Gizmo off, you've got this transpose bar. And everything's about where you place that bar. So, for example, I drew that bar out like this, which means if I move in this direction now, I can stretch out the model in this direction. If I drew out the bar this way, then I can stretch out the model in this direction. Instead of grabbing the end, you can also grab the middle, and you can move around anywhere. So that's the Move tool. You can see you can also cut parts of your model by just grabbing the front end where you draw from. And holding Alt with your keyboard while doing any of this will always change it up. So Alt here, for example, will only move the end of it and kind of gradient to moving the front. So that's kind of useful sometimes. Scale, similarly, scale uniformly, scale directionally, scale uniformly from the back end. It basically changes pivots. And holding Alt will only scale the end. So it kind of tapers your scale. So Alt is really powerful. Here's holding Alt in the middle. It can really help you make some good design decisions, changing up your form, changing up your layout. It's really all about form and shape and how light hits things and creates shadow. That's what most of sculpting is, controlling form. And rotate, lastly, if you grab from the end, will help you rotate. If you grab the middle, will rotate down the middle, kind of adjusting where your pivot point is, And you can even move the transpose line, and then it'll rotate around that point. It changes the pivot. All right. That's pretty much all I wanted to show about that. Like I said, if you hold Alt, you can do some really cool effects. Kind of curving this into a yin-yang kind of thing, just by holding Alt and rotating. So that's a quick primer on how to use these tools. It's really about practice, I guess. And you'll figure it out as you go. All right, I like what's going on here. I'll probably continue it along the back end, going along with the shape of the trapezius here. Might change it up here, do a different patch for the top of the scapula area. I'll come back to the back. Let's just keep thinking about the front for a sec and answering more of your questions. Hyperion Army is asking, did you see the garment that responds to the gaze of another? Yes, I have seen that, but if you have the link, go for it, add it on. I love showing that kind of stuff in my stream. Someone had made, I guess, a spider suit. It was a Nuke Whipwrecked that had a lot of eyes on it, and it kind of moves the legs when you try to get too close in its personal space. The legs start stabbing at you. And then fashion designers have been playing around and making a lot of cool stuff with 3D printing. Miguel Guerrero on here. What's up, Miguel? Thanks for stopping by. Miguel's an awesome 3D artist, worked on almost all the Avengers movies at Meta Studios. All right, Hyperion Army just posted the link. That was fast. All right, check this out. Caress of the Gaze. Clothing that responds to your eyes. Kind of goes with the music. Artist Behnaz Fahari. He's got some cameras built in. Depends where the person is looking. Changes it up. How cool is that? Robotics, man. Robotics mixed with fabric, mixed with 3D printing. Coming to a Star Trek future pretty soon. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, Hyperion Armory. More fashion stuff on here. Jewelry design. Design Indaba. Never been there before. But that was dope. I'm probably not going to implement anything like that on these scales. But thank you for sharing. I don't think I can pull it off in 2 weeks. All right, let me think about some design choices for this dress and how I'd want things to flow. I'm going to pull up some reference on my my right hand screen here. It's my reference monitor. You guys are seeing my Cintiq. And I'm going to pull up some fish scales and such, you know. All right. In order to differentiate these patches a bit more, I don't want it to be so smooth. Might rotate these up a little bit. Really help to differentiate the different patches. So you can use a combination. I'm more comfortable with the transpose tools just because I have more experience playing around with them. The Gizmo is a new addition to, I believe, ZBrush 2018. But that just means I have to practice it a bit more. All right, so what I want to do here is start having these spines or these scales go down a bit as well. So go maybe along the flow of the abs. Let's try that, see if that works any better. The way, if you think about where the muscles of the abdomen insert and where they connect using tendons to the internal skeletal structure here, they kind of go downwards. So I kind of want to follow the flow of nature. Nature is smarter than all of us. Some of the things you find in reality is better than almost anything a concept artist could create. And the best concept artists reference nature all the time. I think a lot of 3D and a lot of sculpting in general is about finding good reference. That's interesting. I like that it does still seem to flow from the small inside to the outside. So it's not kind of completely random. I think some of these guys need to start getting bigger. see. I gotta be careful with how big I make them, especially when they're pointing downwards, because that'll actually restrict my mobility. You know, I'll try to bend, and these spikes will start stabbing me if I try to bend too much. So you've got to think about range of motion when you do these sculpts. So maybe I'll do the small to big like this and do that again. One way to speed this workflow up a little bit is to group these into different chunks. So let's solo select just what's going on. There's the spikes that we've drawn so far, the scales. I'm going to rotate, use the transpose tool while holding control to mask my selection off. And I'm going to split hidden. Nope, damn it, not split hidden. That just hides the arm. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is split masked. So I don't believe I have that here. That is for you guys and me under subtools, split, unmasked points. There we go. And so the area that was masked kind of gets split onto its own subtool. Everything else is still there. It's just soloed out so you don't see it. But now basically I've got all of those new scales that I've drawn onto their own subtool layer. And now I can think about it a bit better. And I can subdivide this even further and think about the patches and how I want them. So let's see. With my mask lasso selected, maybe come down here and select these guys. I didn't want to risk selecting these other scales, so I just selected only the ones I wanted. And I can go down to masking, and I can grow my mask. Maybe I should have done this at a lower resolution. A bit hard to grow the mask when your resolution is relatively high. You know what I could do? I could try to blur the mask and then grow it. That might be faster. Nope, not that fast. Oh well. I'm just going to select it. Trying to be a bit more accurate. But I'm glad you guys are following me along on my latest experiment here, because that's what this is. Another experimentation in the design process, in the sculpting process, in the 3D process. All right, so I've got those masked out, so I'll do the same thing again now. Subtool, split, masked or unmasked points. This is a good question. This is too long of a patch. I don't think I could probably print that in one go. So I should look at printing only the side. So maybe something here. All right, that looks good. So that can be one patch along the front, and then this can be one big patch along the side. And I've got a 12-inch by 12-inch print bed, so I think that's, that's probably going to work. Let's see. Again, split on mask points. And now I've got a few different groups. And I can try to color code them a bit. So with MRGB selected, after selecting a color, somewhat light color, I can go to color, fill object on whichever part I'm on. Cool. And go back to white. There's some more groups there. So basically just grouping these scales into patches. That's where my head's at. Design and group the scales into patches. I was thinking about the arm earlier as well and thinking, do I want the scales to go up or down the flow? This looks a bit threatening, which is kind of cool, but this might be actually more practical because, again, thinking about range of motion, if I have too many spikes going outward this way, when I try to bend my hand, it'll stab me. So that's not ideal. So you might have smaller ones around the seam here, smaller scales, and might have them kind of change direction. All right, so now with this pink patch, since we just did the upper abs, let's duplicate it and see if we can make it continue down. All right, so just duplicated that. I'm going to select the move tool. Just move it all down. And again, design phase, so I don't really care if it's perfectly intersecting or anything like that. Right now it's about figuring it out, figuring out the look. Just using the move tool, really big, to just sculpt this into place. And let's apply a different color to it so we can tell the difference. Not that red, it's too red. And since I'm on this already, I should just color this Infinity Gauntlet part a bit reddish orange too. And just so I can stop seeing this skin flicker, I'm just going to color that white. All right, here we go. So there's another patch, or at least the starts of one. I'm going to save right now before I forget to, or before ZBrush crashes. Scale mail shirt 1, okay. And you know what? I think let's make this a 2. I've done plenty of stuff on it right now. Okay. Sabatat was thinking, I'm thinking range of motion around the armpit before too. Good point. You want like all of these side, you know, near the armpit. I might actually leave a lot of it kind of unscaled because I want to be able to move. I mean, and this shoot is going to be underwater, so I got to be able to properly flow. That's another reason I was thinking about these guys in the I don't know what even to call this, the neck piece, the shoulder piece. If I had this stretched out too much, like too far wide as part of the concept, it might look cooler, it might be interesting, but at this point it would prevent me from raising my shoulders. So you've got to think about range of motion engineering and all this practical stuff when you're thinking about making your ideas reality. Might actually make this smaller. Yeah, maybe. That's not bad. And maybe I should even have these scales kind of, now these side scales go upwards in order to get me more range of motion without being too stabby. Let's see, let's try that. Maybe undo till these scales are gone. Let's make it the right color again. And then let's draw out the scales upwards this time. So you can see what I mean if I use that original brush that I had created. These scales are really sharp. And they're probably too sharp. And they're not going in that far into the mesh. So I'm actually going to change the depth under brush depth. Bury it a little bit better. So it'll kind of bury into the plane. Now, pointing these upwards makes it look really scary and menacing, which actually may not be a bad way to go, because I do want this to be different from, you know, other Aquaman stuff that I've seen. This kind of looks like teeth now. But you got to be careful when you're doing your designs, because it changes the alignment sometimes of your character. Like that, to me, makes this character seem a lot more evil or villainous, because there's a lot more sharp edges sticking out of him. And it's not as rounded. Good guys have a lot more rounded, squared off edges. Bad guys have a lot of points and triangles. However, this does, one, make it more badass. Two, give me more range of motion. So maybe, you know, if Aquaman does acquire all the Infinity Stones, he is a bit more evil. You never know. Alright, so I'll come back to thinking about that design. You can see it's pretty loose right now. Pretty vague the way I'm doing it. I don't really want spikes all the way across the back. It'll probably make it too spiky, and then I won't be able to move my neck backwards without stabbing myself. And that looks a bit more evil by adding more spikes. So I might not add those. Thinking about those areas of rest, clean, flat areas, and areas of detail. Detail variation. Playing around with these scales here to see if I should have some, you know, just changing it up a little bit here and there. That's one thing I like about ZBrush, is the ability to play around as I design. It's not all set in stone. Nothing's set in stone until it's real. And even then, you can use a Dremel tool, you can use all sorts of real-world carpentry to change it up. That's kind of interesting. I like the look of that. Definitely changes the alignment, a bit more evil, but I'm cool with it for now because it gives me more range of motion. Give and take, you know. Joanne Ragudo says, I love those teeth scales turned up on the gorget. So I guess that's the terminology for what I'm trying to build here. The neck piece, the gorget. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, definitely. Joanne, how do you know medieval armor terms off the top of your head? I did learn some myself though. I learned vambraces and greaves recently, because those are the pieces for your forearms and legs. Those are vambraces for the arms, forearms. I'm not sure how to spell greaves. That's not it. That's a wrapper. Greaves. There we go. Those are the leg pieces. So I'm not sure if I'm even going to bother making any arm pieces or leg pieces. Might not have time. Time is the ultimate decider. But I will be making a gorget, because I've got that. All right, so now let's get back to this. You can see I like to bounce around a lot as I do this. Save again. And I'm going to change up the scales along the side here, because I'm not feeling these anymore. This is just, the idea was to kind of flow along with the bicep, but I'm not getting any range of motion here. So I might do this where I shrink the scales down near the end. And then I might decide to just do them all upwards. So let's see. Let's start by doing that. Let's just start by having more scales go upwards. Go back to my insert mesh brush. Switch back to my regular flatter scales. Start drawing those on. And forearms, you kind of do want some big scales because you want to be able to actually defend yourself in a fight, you know? Makes sense that these would be bigger. Armor plating, in a sense. And as we go along the side here, I might even push that a lot more. Make these guys a lot bigger. Again, thinking about the flow that I want, thinking about wet areas I want to change up the silhouette. Like that, I like how that changes up the silhouette, and it doesn't affect my range of motion, so I don't mind those scales being pretty large. Thanks again for joining me on the stream, everyone. Hope you guys are enjoying yourselves and having a good Monday morning. Well, it's Monday morning here in Los Angeles. Not sure where you are in the world right now. Where's everyone tuning in from? If you're on Twitch or Facebook, just comment in what time it is where you're at and what city and or country you're viewing this from. I'm curious to know that. It's definitely interesting. Might be able to push this a bit further here with the back of the forearm because range of motion matters less when you don't need it. What I mean by that is the back of my elbow can be a really big guy, a big scale, because my elbow only goes till here. It doesn't go further, you know? So if I have a big scale there, that's all right, as long as it doesn't interact too strangely with any of the other scales. And this is the design phase, so I shouldn't really worry so much about them intersecting with each other, but I think all 3D artists have a little bit of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. If you hold, I believe, shift as you come up, it'll restrain your transpose tool only to go in one direction. That's useful. And like I said, I'm not a concept artist, so maybe if I did draw over this in Photoshop, I might be able to figure this out faster. You know what? The heck with that. Let's just do it. Let's take this into Photoshop, think about these scales, draw them out a bit. Let's see here. I will get a layer without any of these scales on it. Then I'll get the other layer. All right, let's do an auto groups here. Hide the arm, hide the body. And let's do a split again. Split hidden. I had hidden this earlier before and it must have split these layers. So what I'm going to do now is go under my geometry, modify topology, and I'm going to weld points. And that should weld all of those. Then I'll auto group it. And Dynamesh again for good measure. There we go. Alright, so there's the body base mesh, the scan that I got from Agisoft. Here's the gorget, or gorget. I don't really know the best way of saying that. Let's clean up my scene a bit better. A lot of unnecessary stuff in here. Alright. So, let's think about this design in 2D first a bit before we continue in 3D, because it's taking a long time to really think about all the way around. Sabotage from Budapest. That's awesome, man. I would love to go to Budapest. Taran Singh, 6 p.m. in the UK. Very cool. 7 p.m. in Budapest, so it is evening for you guys. All right. Toasted Prinny saying the Art Institute of Chicago has full armor displays. That's true. I went to school. I went to college at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and it has an excellent museum. This is not the AI, those for-profit schools that are popping up everywhere. The School of the Art Institute is like this big museum school, really good conceptual art school for learning the basics, fine art, and sculpting and painting and fashion illustration and all this stuff that I studied there, in addition to 3D animation. But I don't know. I'm kind of hesitant to recommend it because it was very expensive and didn't prepare me for a career as a 3D artist. It prepared me to be a starving artist because it kind of prepares you. Art schools in general want you to be very conceptual. Why are you doing this? Why is this, a trend? Why? And what's more useful in the industry is knowing how to do things. And you figure out the why, you figure out your voice, you figure out your style over time, over experience, over making many projects. It's not something that I feel like 18, 20-year-old kids should be paying a lot of money to figure out. And that's enough of my rant on expensive private schooling in America, because I've got a lot of debt to pay off on that, as do most Americans, which is insane, isn't it? As compared to how education is funded in the rest of the world or in more social countries. All right, so let's export this and say body scan JPEG. Okay, without moving the camera now, let's get this on. Maybe let's turn on both the gorget and the scale mail. So I'll have that below. Gorget. And then let's get these scales that are on their own layers. I'm just using them as reference for now, so let's bring them in. Cool. That's another unnecessary piece. Delete that. Don't crash. Don't you dare crash. Good. Save again, because that was scary. I will say that the School of the Art Institute's armor collection is awesome. Everything in that museum is awesome. All right, now I'm going to turn on the gorget as well, I believe. Just because it looks better with both of these pieces on. Now, you know what? I'll just do scales. Let's see if this works like I think it works in my head. Scales 1. Jurassic World! Okay. I am excited for that movie coming out. I'm probably going to try to go watch it in ZBrush Live in 40x, because that'll be fun. Have you guys seen movies in 40x? You know what I'm talking about? 40x is when you go into a cinema and they've got like the chair that really vibrates and shakes and moves and has like massage chair features, and then it's got the puffs of air that shoot out and then just like move you around, and then it's got water that sprays on you, so when there's wet scenes you just get splashed. It's my favorite ways of watching movies these days. Okay, let's open up inside the Aquaman project the scales one. Let's also open body scan and the Gorget or Gorget or Gorget or Gorget. I'm gonna have to look this up before the end of the stream, how to properly say it. All right, base scales 1, Gorget. All right, so let's just use the Gorget as base and then start with these scales. And I can select the area that I want. Maybe just use the lasso tool. Finally, a reason to use my Cintiq. Been using the mouse all morning. I'm just going to select only the scales here. All right. And let's draw a mask around this area. Then we can refine that mask a little bit. It's kind of how I work in Photoshop, a lot of masks. You can turn on the mask at the bottom with that item mask button, and then you can just paint black and white and see what areas you want to see and what areas you want to hide. All right. So now let's think more like a concept artist and try to think about the flow of these scales and the way I want this to work before I start doing too much 3D. I'm going to duplicate that, transform, flip horizontally, move it over to the other end so I can see kind of a reasonable facsimile of what it would look like facing, both sides. Now let's adjust this mask as well. Nah, that looks weird. Let's do it this way. Make sure I'm inverting the mask on the right layer. There we go. Photoshop is just a great tool for the planning stage for me. And just fun to draw Photoshop as well. Just because we're 3D artists doesn't mean we don't want to or get to do 2D time to time. All right, so zooming out on that, take a look. I might also group these guys, merge them, and desaturate. So I'm not looking too much at color right now. Because when you're thinking about shape and form, sometimes it's best to not think about color. All right, so this gives me a good idea of the way things are going, but I want to step back and think a bit more big picture and just think about the flow of the scales, the directional flow of the scales, and the underlying anatomy before I continue going, in 3D and sculpting. So I'm going to create a new layer, And I can use this as reference for a second. Lower the opacity. Switch to something like maybe red. And then think about the flow that I want. So obviously this is kind of going in this direction. These guys are going outward but also inward. So kind of following the path of the deltoid. All right. This now, I've got some interesting stuff going on which I may change up. But I've got what appears to be in this direction, kind of going along with the flow of the trapezius again. I might want to push that even further to really push the flow similar to the trapezius. And I may not want to go that direction at all later. For the abs, I want it to go down, but I'm seeming to be going a bit off to the left and right. Let's see. My belly button's over there. I should change up where these abs are at, actually. Let's see where that is. Hard to tell in this model right there. Maybe in the ZBrush I can see. Take a look. Oh no! The inevitable ZBrush crash while working. It's kind of a rule when you're streaming or teaching or doing a presentation that your software is going to crap out on you. But luckily ZBrush is trying to save the project file in progress. And I think I saved right before I left. I'm going to try to figure out what my belly button is. Alright, in the meanwhile, if you guys have any questions, just add them into the Twitch or Facebook chat window. Sam Peterson Art is asking, when you get into mass production process with your Fungus Ores, is it still done with 3D printing, or do you have them done with something else such as injection molding? So Sam, I am actually having them injection molded for mass production, and that's because the price point is definitely going to be lowered a lot by injection molding or rotocasting. When you're making 16,000 or more toys like I am, you want to go with established methods. 3D printing is still too expensive. For something as small as this, a high resolution 3D print unpainted costs about, 20 to 30 bucks, Maybe if I'm printing them myself with my own resin, maybe a proprietary resin, I can lower that price down to 15, maybe 10, but that's still 10 bucks for an unpainted gray toy, And if I am making it for 10, and if I try to sell it, for 10 or 15, it's hard to make that much profit. But with injection molding, something in this scale can be made for something like $3 per unit painted, so you can get more profit by doing the quantity. But obviously for that end, you need to do a lot of, you need to have a much larger mass quantity order. Otherwise factories won't even mess with you. They need at least 2,000 orders per part. But 3D printing is an important part of my process for making those tools. So here's 3D prints of my Fungus Ores. There's Braco, so Brachiosaurus mixed with a witch's hat mushroom, and Salamander, which is a Dimetrodon mixed with a turkey tail. And you can see how these are 3D prints that are being used to create the molds for the tooling. The tooling is going to be all engineered in this way, and then it's going to be, how should I explain? Kind of lost wax cast method. The inside will just get melted out with hot metal getting poured into it, so that there'll be a negative. And then there'll be a positive of the actual tool on the outside, which will be made, the metal tooling. And that metal tooling is what the plastic is going to get poured into for rotocasting, where it spins really fast and puts a thin layer of plastic all the way around, so you have a hollow model. PVC kind of vinyl toys are made like that. Or injection molding, which is just pour plastic in. In my case, I think we'll do injection molding because it's not a very big model. It's a small model, so it should be solid. So if you want to follow updates on Fungus Ores, because I'm doing a lot of things at the same time. I'm building an augmented reality app, kind of like my own version of Pokemon Go, the way I want it to be. More interactive, more mini games, more encouraging kids to get out there and play, as well as teaching them about paleontology, about various different types of mushrooms, because I'm fascinated by that. So I think other people will be too. So we're making a bunch of merch. Got shirts. I'll be exhibiting at Designer Con this year. It's an expo in Pasadena, and you can see our journey. There's my wife Fa at Toy Fair Expo in New York, and there's me. I got invited onto a panel to speak because I had a successful Kickstarter about my toy line. So the toys aren't launched yet. They're just, the Kickstarter was successfully funded, and the toys are being made right now. And I'll likely be going to my factory in July to go visit, and then I'll post updates on here as well. Instagram.com/fungusores. And yeah, so if you're interested in more of the mass production process, just follow along and feel free to ask me at any point more details. I do go into it a little bit in my class online at Mold3D Academy, mold3dacademy.com. Self-paced classes, 3D printing for ZBrush artists. And that's for $200. You get 8 weeks worth of lectures in how to sculpt in ZBrush for 3D print. And I talk about wearables, I talk about figures and characters and multi-character maquettes. I talk about jewelry. And so it's a pretty solid price for all the stuff you get to learn. And then I'd also talk a bit about mass production and mold making and, phone cases and stuff like that. So that's on Mold3D Academy, 3D printing for ZBrush artists. And I'm going to be making an updated course soon, which I hope to launch in August, hopefully, if I can get all the class nailed down in time. All right, so let's bring back before it closed. Here we go. All right, so I can tell from this scan that my navel, my belly button's around there. So if I go back to Photoshop now, you can kind of draw that in or know where it's at. So I'm actually not that far off. This is kind of how abs would flow in real life. The bottom abs are usually much longer. I don't necessarily need to follow the anatomy, but it's nice to sometimes go with the actual flow of the underlying muscle, because that'll help me be able to identify problem areas later. All right, so the bicep, if you think about where it inserts under your mesh, this one inserts here, and this one inserts kind of under everything, between, kind of actually on the side of your, I don't know, rib cage? It's not the rib cage. I'll have to find out the actual skeletal terminology. All my anatomy, the Latin is all gone. But can do this. The brachioradialis, do remember that, kind of flows along the side. And it's a muscle that connects here and flows along. So I might want to do that, because right now my scales along my edge here, if we take a look at them, I didn't even post them here, but my scales along the arm that I was playing around with aren't really doing that. They're just kind of free floating there. So they don't look as good as if I did incorporate some flow into it. So let's try that actually, since we're here in ZBrush already, and I've got the brachioradialis on my mind. And that'll be the last thing I do today, because it's past 10 o'clock, and I've got to get to my actual work. Start adjusting the flow of these guys. go along with the flow of the underlying anatomy with the brachioradialis muscle. And hopefully that'll translate well into the design. Might scale this one down. Now what, that is actually not even in properly. I'm going to rotate it in place. Gets a bit more buried. There we go. Let's load my insert mesh brush again. And continue drawing these out. And already I feel like that's helping to go along with a flow. So you've got to select a flow. You can't just depend on luck to make it happen. Everything's got to be a conscious decision. And that's how you'll come up with some really cool stuff. Decide consciously what you want. All right, so I like what's happening there, the kind of flow that I've got going on. So I'll keep messing with that. And I'll keep thinking in Photoshop, and I'll keep thinking in ZBrush. And hopefully by next week when you guys tune in to watch this stream, I'll have not only figured out most of these scales, hopefully I'll have printed a patch out. So we'll see. Stay tuned on that, and I'll be able to talk about it. All right, guys, that's it for this stream. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks so much for following along. I had a blast. Thank you guys on Twitch. Throw that in front. Thanks on Twitch. I'm out. And Facebook as well. Thanks for following along, everyone. Rahman is asking, I really need to find a schedule for these programs. Rahman, that does exist. You'll have to go to let's see. I think I saved it under ZBrush Stream Presenters. Yeah. So if you do want to follow along with me or any of the other instructors or streamers on ZBrush, like Shane, Ashley, Michael, Timothy, just go to pixelogic.com, ZBrushLIVE Presenters, scroll down to find your instructor or the person you want to hear the stream of, and then you can see the schedule as well as see their previous live streams. I'm going to be streaming around this time, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time on Mondays for the coming month. So tune in, check it out, and I'll see you next time. Cheers all.